Hey guys, so right off the bat, I'm gonna in advance apologise if I sound a little nasally. Just eating something quite spicy because my parents are around. All right, guys, jumping in. Um, and it turns out I'm a bit softer than I remembered, so it's got my nose running a little bit. So apologies if I sound like I've got a cold. It's just that I've eaten something spicy and I'm a bit softer than I remember. But anyway, so as you guys know, I've been putting out storyboards asking for problems to help solve what people have been struggling with. And one of the ones that came up that I wanted to solve, I kind of jumped this one up the queue a little bit. So if you're tuning in thinking, oh, is he going to tackle my one? Yeah, I will get to it. I'm going to do all of these. But this one resonated with a lot of people because when I put it out there was a lot of people that messaged me saying, oh, that's a good one. I want to jump in on that one. So I figured with this one, I could kind of speak to a lot of people at once and it would be something that would be good for a lot of you. So the query that came in, what do you do when you feel like you're out of your depth and that you aren't progressing? Now, this question was asked to me like specifically about jiu-jitsu. So I'm going to speak specifically about that for some of this, but I'm going to speak it on a wider context because I think it's something that can benefit a lot of people in all walks. So whatever it may be that you're struggling with. So when it comes to measuring progress, right, you've got two ways you can do it. You've got objective measures. So you're talking things that have a definitive measurement that you can track. So simple terms, if you're looking at like getting stronger, the objective measure would be the weight on the bar. You can see that increasing, then you've got a pretty clear-cut indication that you're getting stronger. If you're losing weight, the number on the scales is a pretty clear-cut and easily trackable number that you can measure by. So those will be your objective measures. And you have subjective measures. So subjective being things that are harder to track. They're not less valuable, but they are harder to track and they're open to interpretation a lot of the time. So a subjective measure may be, for example, in those same two examples, lifting weights, the number on the bar may not be going up, but you might find that you're feeling a bit easier with that weight than you were previously. Now, obviously, there's no direct way to compare that, but you might feel it at the time, and that could be a subjective measure of progress. In weight loss, the number on the scale may not change, but you may be feeling more confident in your body. You may feel that you look better in the clothes. So again, that would be a subjective measure. And again, both very important, but not as easy to track, right? Now, the thing with jiu-jitsu specifically is that there's not that many objective measures. It's very hard to definitively track, right? So that leaves this particular one a bit more interesting, and I'm going to speak a bit about something that I think gets overlooked a lot in this. So just with the wording of the question when it came in, what do you do when you feel out of your depth and that you're not progressing? So think about the mental state of someone asking that, right? They're obviously very stressed and they're feeling very concerned with their progress, and they're feeling like I said, they're feeling frustrated perhaps. So someone that is in that frame of mind, looking at something like jiu-jitsu, it could be looking at anything, but looking at something like jiu-jitsu that is very, very subjectively judged, very hard to tell when you are actively improving in a clearly measurable way. That person's in a mindset where they're much more likely to overlook the little subjective improvements that they're making, right? Because they're feeling overwhelmed. So they may look at something and be like, you might say to them, oh, you pulled this off well this time. And their immediate knee-jerk reaction, because they're in that frame of mind where they're feeling negative about themselves, might be, oh, I was just lucky. Or, things happened my way this time. And they'll put a spin on it because there's no objective measure to give them, right? It's not like, oh, well, look, your jiu-jitsu is like 87% more effective now. There's no way to measure that. So, and again, this will apply to anyone outside of jiu-jitsu as well, but very specifically in jiu-jitsu, the mindset. So when you're monitoring your own progress, whatever it may be progress towards, think about your own mindset before you start analysing your progress. How are you feeling in that moment? Are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling overwhelmed by it? Are you feeling fed up? What is your mental state when you're looking at it? Because the chances are, if you're in a negative mental state when you're looking at your progress, you're not really going to see the progress. You're only going to see little errors and things like that, especially if you're that way inclined, and a lot of people are, where you tend to be very hard on yourself when it comes to judging yourself. You'll find a way to kind of overlook improvements that you're making, and you'll find a way to zero in on things that are not going your way. So like a very specific one that I'll give you just to put into perspective, and it's a jiu-jitsu story from myself, was like I had 2 rounds back to back, right? Rolling with one guy, rolling with another guy. And in the first round, I felt absolutely amazing. I was against a more experienced guy than myself, rank-wise as well. And I did really well. I kind of, it's just training, so there's no winning the round. But I felt like everything I was doing was flowing well, and I felt really, really good about how I was managing to execute everything that I wanted to execute. The following round, I was against someone that was lower ranked than me, and they absolutely picked me apart and decimated me. And then you get the highs and lows of the sport, right? Now, I could look at that 2 ways, right? Because they're both subjective measures. I could look at that and be thinking like, oh, one of these rounds, everything went perfectly for me, I pulled it off, I feel really positive about that. Or I could zero in on the second round and be like, I'm shit, nothing's working for me. And the truth is in the middle, right? There's a measure of progress there. But if I'm in a negative headspace, I'm going to zero in on that second round. If I'm looking at things from the optimistic glass half full mindset, I'm going to zero in the first round and basically completely disregard the second round. The truth is in the middle, like there were things I did well and there were things that I didn't do well. But it's hard to realize that middle ground when you're in a really negative headspace and you're looking at your own, you're in your self-judging, especially in something as subjective as jiu-jitsu. So there's that. Basically, before you even try and analyze where you're at, have a think about your headspace and see kind of, are you in the right spot now to look at something that could be so subjective and judge it accurately? Or are you in a situation where you're more likely to be hard on yourself and kind of get down on yourself about it and potentially overlook things that are going well for yourself? Now, outside of that, right? And this is with any single goal that you're doing. So this applies to everyone, not just jiu-jitsu. It can be weight loss. It could be someone that's trying to train for a marathon. It could be someone that just wants to get stronger. We don't have control of the outcome, right? We control our behaviors and our input to those, to that goal. So, for example, if I want to run a marathon, I'm going to run a marathon in 3 hours, for example, 3.5 hours. No chance I'd be able to do it, but let's just say I wanted to do that, right? I can control my training. I can control my sleep to a degree. Obviously, I've got a little one, so there is that. But I can make sure I go to bed on time. I can control my nutrition. I can control all these things. But it's not to say, even with everything lined up perfectly, I can't control the outcome that I'll run it in that time, because there's so many things outside of my control that can influence that. So the example right there would be my son. Like I could be going to bed at the right time, but he could keep me awake, for example. That would negatively impact my sleep, which would negatively impact my recovery, which would negatively impact my training, which would negatively impact my performance. There's a big chain of dominoes. On the running day, I might just wake up feeling flat and underperform. It happens because your training might be perfect. You're running by yourself. You got your jam on. You're enjoying yourself, but when it comes to game day nerves, you underestimate how much of an impact they can have, and that could hinder your performance. And again, this will happen for any goal, but the point I'm making applies to all of them, in that you can control what you put into it, but you cannot necessarily control the outcome, right? Now, when we're talking about jiu-jitsu, this is magnified even more so, and I'm not just like bigging up jiu-jitsu here. Obviously, like show my hand straight away, I'm a massive jiu-jitsu fanboy, but when I say it's beyond your control, right? So you can control showing up and training, right? But you cannot control the way the techniques and the knowledge sits with you, because your learning style may be something that is not being correctly catered for, or it might be just that you're not having enough time to practice techniques and things like that. So what I mean by that, right? When it comes to jiu-jitsu very specifically, you can learn by seeing a technique. You could learn by practicing the technique yourself. You could learn by having the technique done on you so you can feel it and kind of feel what you're trying to replicate. Now, if you have a coach that's not going through the details of the move, for example, it could be, and you're a very, or not going through enough, breaking down the details enough for you, and you're a very descriptive learner, you want to hear the details in the most minutest of possible detail that you can get. It may be that they're not explaining it enough to the point where you'll just click with it, right? Or if they're rushing through the drills, you might be someone that learns by doing, but they're not giving you enough time to practice the move, for example. So you can control going to the class, but you can't necessarily control how much of the knowledge seeps in with you. So when it comes to that kind of thing, I always recommend to people to video techniques, so you always have something to refer back to, because at the end of a hard class, you may learn all these techniques, you go into sparring, it all like runs around, goes crazy. By the time you leave, you've kind of forgotten the techniques, right? So having a video to refer back to is for me, for my own learning style, massively important, really, really helps. But like I say, so you control your training, you're showing up at the gym, but you can't control, for example, the learning rate of the people that you're rolling with. So you've got two people, right? They go to the same classes, and so they're exposed to the same techniques, and they go to the same amount of classes each week. So we're making these two people as equal as possible, right? In terms of what they're putting into the jiu-jitsu. But one person may just be picking up the techniques better because that style of teaching resonates with them better. Or it may be that the technique... sorry guys, I got a bit of connection lag there, randomly. Anyway, or it may be that the techniques in question... so for me, for example, I teach like a criteria where each month I'll have a certain theme. It may be that the theme of the month works better for that person, their game, their attributes, and you have no control over it. Now, attributes are another thing that is massively overlooked when it comes to jiu-jitsu, right? And in any sport really, but physical attributes. This is going to be fun. Keeps dropping out. So if you're learning a technique where it benefits being long, lean and flexible, and you're not long, lean and flexible, that technique may not gel with you as much as it would against someone that has the physical attributes that technique is designed for, or that technique... Sorry, I don't know if you guys are noticing this, but it keeps pausing for me. Very annoying. But anyway, so your physical attributes, you have some control over them. Like you can do physical training to help improve your attributes, but there is a ceiling on that for absolutely everyone. No matter how much of a genetic specimen you are, everyone has a genetic ceiling that you can't exceed, right? So for me, for example, I can train myself to sprint and to run faster, but I'm never going to sprint as fast as Usain Bolt. I could train sprinting for 100 years at my peak. If I never aged, if I stayed in my absolute prime, I could train sprinting every single day for 100 years with the best sprinting coaches, and I would never, ever be as good a sprinter as Usain Bolt, because his physical attributes are just perfectly designed for that event and mine are not. And the same with jiu-jitsu. Everyone has a game, but it's a case of finding your game. So finding one that fits your attributes, your fitness level, your strength, your flexibility, and building it around that. Now, obviously, you also have to work to know and to realize as well that the attributes of the people that you're sparring with are also beyond your control. So you may be technically very proficient at a technique, but if the person that you're sparring with is physical to the point where they can shut down your technique just by their physicality and their attributes, it can lead to very demoralizing rounds. I've been on the receiving end of numerous ones of those. So for me, for example, I'll give you two extremes. I've had rounds where I've gone against someone that is just too big, too heavy, and too strong, so that everything I've tried has been shut down just by their physicality. I've also had rounds with people that are too quick, too sudden, too precise, and the movements are too sharp for me to keep track of, and they just outpace me, for example. Like, there's always the chance of being out-attributed. The other thing is, and I've given a scenario with two people that are going to the same amount of classes each day, or each week rather, and being exposed to the same techniques. And you can see there that even amongst that dynamic, there are things that can influence the outcome that are beyond your control, being the other person's attributes, their learning style, and things like that. But it's very rare that two people put the same amount of time in. So you're talking things like, you may be comparing yourself to someone that's getting down to another session a week than you, and 2 other sessions a week than you, 3 other sessions a week than you. Then they get more time on the mats, and they're being exposed to more techniques, and they're being exposed to more positions, and they're practicing it more, and it's just more repetition. And the thing to remember in anything, no matter what it is you're trying to do, time invested plays a massive role. So what I mean by that is what Chris Halter said, so head of Combat Base, which is obviously our affiliation. It's not who's best, it's who's left. So the people on a long enough timeline, the people that put in the more time will start to see the more results, right? And obviously, again, there are ceilings on that, physical ceilings and whatnot, whatever it may be. And there are outliers, the people that will just pick up things remarkably quickly, regardless of how little they do. But on a long enough timeline, the general consensus and general average is the people that invest more time into something are going to excel at it at a quicker rate. So if you have a training partner you train with all the time, you train on a Monday and a Thursday, and that person trains Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they're being exposed to twice the amount of jiu-jitsu as you. They're going to improve in theory, or they have the potential to improve double the amount because they're putting more time into it. And so looking at yourself from that subjective lens of being like, oh, they're getting better than me and I'm shit, it's not, you're overlooking the small details that could be influencing their progression and where you're struggling. And I think that's an important thing to get on, especially when you're in a negative headspace, is overlooking all the little things that can be hindering your progression or helping other people's progression that you're training with in anything, just because you're in that headspace and you're being hard on yourself. So my advice to people, and again, this is specifically about jiu-jitsu, but about anything in general, any goal that you have, whenever you're looking at your progression on something, be it weights, losing weight, lifting weights, running, whatever it might be, before you even look at all the subjective measures, think about your headspace. Are you in the right headspace to judge what you're looking at effectively and objectively, where you won't overlook the little progressions that you could miss, that you should see but you would miss if you're in a negative headspace. So have a quick scan of your own mind. Where are you at that moment in time? Is it the best time to be progressing or assessing rather your progress? Secondly, realize that you can only control your behaviors. You can't control the outcome. So you can control the time you invest in it. So go there, ask questions when you're stuck, take videos of techniques so you can refer back to them. And third, when it comes to any journey really, and I'm talking like, unless it's a profession where your livelihood depends on it, focusing on the end goal can be massively demoralizing, because if it's a race, for example, or a fight, you're focusing on one incident where you might not show up at 100%, and it can go, it could be months of your time invested to one particular moment that doesn't go your way, and it's very easy to take that moment and feel disheartened by it, right? But when it's not your profession, when it's something that you enjoy doing, enjoy the journey. So enjoy showing up. And I am aware that this is hard to hear, because I hate it when I get beat up at jiu-jitsu. I'm that way out as well. But I channel it into the mindset of, well, okay, so what am I having problems with? So basically, don't look at it, and again, this one's very specifically jiu-jitsu, but I will give some other examples of this shortly. But in a jiu-jitsu sense, look at what's happening. So what's causing you problems? So are you finding it hard to retain the techniques? Or are you remembering the techniques, but they're not working when you're trying them because of some small detail? Or are you in a situation where the person's putting you in a position where you're not able to use those techniques that you've learned? Or are you in a position where you're training someone that is just too big and too strong, too physical for you to apply those techniques? Look at very specifically what's happening. What situations you're getting caught in? Is there a repeating pattern? So are you finding yourself stuck on the bottom and someone's catching your left arm in this armbar, for example, repeatedly? Okay, so that keeps happening. So there's a problem somewhere in that chain where you're leaving a gap, and it's basically just looking at it from a very, like, under the microscope. So what little details are showing up that are patterns that you can improve on. So again, for me, for my own journey, I noticed massively, and this was when I was training with my coach. So again, this shows you how I can empathize with this kind of mindset, because my coach is miles better than me. So obviously I shouldn't judge myself too harshly on that. And this applies to any one of my jiu-jitsu mats anyway, which are, so basically people comparing themselves to people that have been a lot more time invested in the sport, been doing it for a lot longer, very good people, and they're thinking, oh, I'm crap. But they're looking at people that, they've been doing it for maybe a third of the time of the people they're comparing themselves to, and they're judging themselves for a very harsh light. So for me, for example, training with my coach, miles better than me, and I would start sat down trying to retain guard, and he would just like step through my guard like it wasn't even there, and he would do this again and again and again and again, and I had to think, like, okay, well, what's happening here? Like, is my guard terrible? But it was, but why? Why is it terrible? What's happening? How's he getting past? And then I realized, okay, he's passing consistently to my right. So I'm obviously leaving a gap to my right. So what can I do? And I started looking at techniques to try and block that gap, right? And obviously, when I say it worked to a degree, but then obviously he's much better than me, so he passes to the left. So now I've got another hole to fix. And basically take it from there. Solve one little problem at a time. So, okay, I keep getting turned over when I'm on top. Okay, so what's going wrong? Where am I putting my balance? How can I improve my balance? How can I not get turned over? Okay, cool. Now they're not turning me over that same way anymore, but they're doing something else. So what else are they doing? And basically problem solve like that. Look at it. Look at your progress from an emotionally detached point of view. And it's very hard to do. Like, I'm 100% on board with that. It's hard to do because I'm a proud guy and I hate getting beat up. But look at it from an emotionally detached point. Okay, so what's happening to me? Is it happening the same way consistently? Can I stop it from happening that way? If not, okay, how can I avoid getting to that situation where it will happen? Oh, I am your uke, yeah. So this is Tom, if anyone can see that. He is my uke. So all these techniques that I practice, that I show, Tom is usually on the receiving end of those. So when I was talking at the very beginning about people that learn by having things done to them, Tom would be a good example, but also it's quite fun to be heavy and to bully him as well. But yeah, like I say, look at sorry, my connection dropped out again there. It's a bit of a nightmare today. I don't know why. But looking at it from a non-jiu-jitsu perspective, right? Let's say that you're running and you're feeling run down and stuff like that, and you're thinking your times are getting slower, and you can be getting hard on yourself. Oh, I'm getting unfit. What, are you? Or is there some area of recovery that you're overlooking? Are you running yourself into the ground to the point where you cannot physically perform at your best? Or do you have injuries that are slowing you down? Is your nutrition not fueling you? It same applies for weightlifting. Okay, so the number on the bar may not be going up as you want it to, and you might be plateaued. And this happens to all people that are doing strength training. Okay, so you may not be able to put more weight on the bar, but can you increase the volume a little bit so you're getting more overall volume and then potentially get strength gains that way? If not, can you alter the tempo, so you're lifting the same weight with more eccentric loading. That can elicit more strength responses. Can you find a way around the plateau? Marcus Aurelius said, dropped out again. So Marcus Aurelius said that which impedes action leads to action or advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. It's a very bullish way to look at things. I do think it's a very cool phrase, but it doesn't mean that when you come to a wall, a plateau, that you have to insist on smashing past it. You don't have to take that mindset. If you're at a plateau at the minute, can you go around it? Can you find another way? It doesn't have to be straight through the brick wall, So like I said, I know this has been very jiu-jitsu heavy. The query was specifically related to jiu-jitsu. So I wanted to address that very specifically to try and help out with it. But wanted to throw some things in there for non-jiu-jitsu practitioners to hopefully take something from. So again, I know I've spoken quite at length here, but like I say, if you wanted to break this down, look at your mental state when you're assessing your progress. Make sure that you're in the right mental state where you're not emotionally attached to it and you can judge it honestly and objectively, even if it's a subjective measure of progress that you're trying to track. Look at factors that you can control. Don't get hung up on things that you can't control. But also realize there are things that are beyond your control that will influence the outcome. So you can't feel like I'm doing everything and I'm just shit. There are a lot of things that will throw a spanner in the works for you there. And then that'll be my advice when it comes to that. Like if you can find a way to kind of take the emotional step back and look at it from as objective a lens as you can and identify small problems and try and solve them one at a time, it's probably the best way to go. And again, that applies to everything, right? Like whatever you're trying to achieve, if you look at it through like the telescope lens and you see like just this giant vast problem, trying to solve it can be massively daunting, right? You'd be like, you can look at something, like if I walk into the other room and I can see there we go, back again. So if I walked into the other room and saw my boy's playpen with things everywhere, I could just be like, oh, fuck's sake, I'm never going to clean this, But don't look at it through the telescope, look at it through the microscope. Okay, there's a pile of books there, let's put those pile of books away, right? Okay, the books are away now, so there's some Lego pieces, let's get those away. And solve it little at a time. If you walk into the playpen and there's just a catastrophe of shit everywhere, it's going to be massively overwhelming. You won't think, how the hell do I fix this? But that's when you take off the telescope lens and you zoom in on the microphone lens and you think, right, okay, one little thing at a time. And so to link this one final time back to very specifically jiu-jitsu, instead of looking at the infinitely complex web that is jiu-jitsu when it comes to almost an infinite permutation of techniques that can link together, there's a finite amount of techniques, but the way they link together, there's untold like kind of manifestations of it. Look at things that you're doing well, or look at things that you're not doing well. Focus on one or two of those things from, so you may think, okay, I'm doing well at getting this armbar. Okay, cool. So how we're going to now zoom in and be like, how can I get to a position where I can do that armbar more frequently? Or if you're looking at the negative side of it, and it's not a bad thing to do, but if you're looking at, okay, when I get pinned, I stay pinned and I get stuck there. Okay, so what pin is troubling you the most? Is it full mount? Okay, cool. Let's learn some mount escapes and let's drill them. And let's keep drilling them and keep drilling them and keep drilling them until... back again. And when you solve that little problem, or even if you make yourself more efficient at navigating that problem when it arises, then move on to the next one. And you find that if you zoom in on enough little details and keep solving them as they pop up, overall, the bigger picture tidies itself up in the long run. So that's been my TED Talk for the day. Bit of a long one, but always the case whenever I'm talking about jiu-jitsu, I tend to get a bit carried away because I'm a nerd and I love jiu-jitsu. So now, at least after all that spicy food, now my nose has finally stopped running at the end of the live. Always a good thing. So yeah, I hope that's been helpful, like I say, and helpful to the non-jiu-jitsu people as well. So like I say, whatever your goal is, try and apply those steps if you can to solving it. But like I say, that last one is a very important one. Don't just get focused on the telescope goal, because if you do, it can look overwhelming and daunting if it's miles off. So basically, zoom in on the little things through the microscope and see what you can solve there. And by the time you then zoom back out at the telescope goal, it looks a lot tidier. And that will apply to whatever goal it may be, not just in jiu-jitsu. So yeah, there you go. Stepped out of my lane, gave a bit of life advice, but like I say, does fit with pretty much any fitness goal that you're going for. Right, and on that note, I'm going to go back and be a social bunny with my parents up here. Thanks for jumping in, guys. I hope this has been valuable to you, and I hope it hasn't been too annoying with my connection dropping out. But it's what happens when people are burning through Netflix and probably downloading loads of stuff on my Wi-Fi. But them's the breaks. Right. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, guys. I'll catch you all at the next one. So I'm going to do... There was another question that came up that I'm going to look at, probably doing on Wednesday. And it was very specifically one for women that were comparing themselves to other women and using it as a way to talk themselves out of doing their goals. So I'm going to tackle that one because, again, it's quite an in-depth one. It resonated with a lot of people. So I'm going to do that one on Wednesday. I'm going to put another box up. I'll do it straight after this. So if anyone that's been watching this has a problem that you're stuck with or anything like that and you want me to do a video to try and help you out, just ping it in the box, and I'll see what I can do. I'll get to all of them. It will just take me some time. Right, folks, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. See you later.